So we really did see a lot of the characters out of their element in episode 8 because of the LSD that was put in the chocolate fountain, but nobody was quite out like Franklin Saint, who was in a battle with his own mind, his past, his present, and also the younger version of Franklin, even though this was Franklin's goal at the beginning, and the reason why he got into this game, which is to help the community. The younger version of Franklin Saint reminded him how many bodies he's left in his quest for power. There was Kevin, Manboy, Tiana, Khadija, and even Alton, and so many more. And there were even comparisons to Franklin and his father Alton, with Rob returning and telling him how much he was responsible for his death. But over these past 2 videos, I've made reference to this conversation that Franklin had with Harvey in episode 6, where Harvey made Franklin realize there were some people that go war to war, but Franklin is a man who has a war inside himself, because he could have been whoever he wanted to be. He could have been a doctor, a legit businessman, or anything he put his mind to, but he chose to be a drug dealer. And as the hallucination scenes with Veronique told Franklin, he can't be a gangster and a family man, he can't be a killer and in honest business as well. So this conversation with Harvey is something I'm going to refer back to at the end of this video. But in the end, Franklin will go down, and if he does go down, Veronique knows that everybody around him will be destroyed, and their only option is to betray him. Ironically, this was Manboy's prophecy from last season, when he told Franklin that those around him, with Leon, Jerome, and his family will turn on him. And this is exactly what we're now seeing play out through Franklin's hallucination scenes, and also with Louie meeting Teddy, and now getting her product directly from him. But where this episode ended with Franklin trying to mend things with Louie, you can never relight a matchstick that's been burned. And this is what's happened in the case of Louie and Franklin's relationship in more ways than one. Because one matchstick which Louie lit was given the go-ahead to Officer Buckley to go after Kane, even though Leon made peace with him. And in the end, all this will do is leave Jerome with a choice to make. Like he said, he can't betray his blood. But what will he do when he realizes Louie put this whole thing in motion with Kane? Because it definitely will start a war as we move into the final season of Snowfall. So with that being said, let's run through the scenes and what we saw play out, starting with Teddy and Louie. And this is something that Louie has been waiting for a long time. Louie and Franklin haven't really been seeing eye to eye, and she did consider going to the Colombians, but Louie's intentions were clear. She wanted to cut Franklin out by buying directly from Teddy, and they made a point how it's been a long time since they've done business, and in that time both of them were shot, and it's also changed both of them. But you can say Louie is making some crazy and wild decisions, first with giving the go-ahead to Buckley on Kane, and now this. And everything that we saw Franklin go through, especially with the conversation with his younger self, made him realize he's not helping those around him, and this inner war led to this moment at the end where he finally apologized to Louie, admitting that he always wanted to be in charge, so he could remain in control. But he should have rather listened and treated Louie like more of a partner, because after all, she did hold the business down with Teddy and everything else when Franklin was recovering. But it's too late because how I mentioned Louie's burned the matchstick by giving Buckley the go-ahead with Kane, but Franklin has burned so many over the course of the season, and last season, it was too late, because Louie already put this shit in motion that she couldn't turn her back on. And all this is going to do is start a war with Kane and Franklin, and I do think it's going to leave Jerome in a difficult position where he has to choose either Franklin or Louie. So where Jerome seemed to have figured shit out over the past few weeks, where he even mentioned he hasn't lost his temper in a while, and he also hasn't drank in a few days, he realized he needed that drink when Louie said Teddy was going to sell to them directly, because he knows at first hand the tension that this will cause. So let's see how Jerome plays this, especially when this starts to play out with Buckley and Kane. But in the lead up to the wedding, we also saw Sissy and Veronique making sure that death doesn't come to those they love the most. So we saw Sissy meeting with Ruben, telling him that there was going to be a wedding next month with Jerome and Louie, where all the key business associates will be invited. But one thing Sissy will always refuse to do is put Franklin in harm's way. Now we also saw Veronique approaching Kane and making sure the deal that Franklin and Leon made was secure, and Kane wouldn't be coming after her because she wanted to make sure she was safe and her baby was safe. But this also rules out any theories that Veronique was working with Kane. And it also goes to show that the conversation that Sissy had with Veronique really hit home. And just like Franklin said how she was talking like her mother, she was now behaving like Sissy, making sure she was safe. But let's come to the wedding, and before we get to Franklin Saint's one hell of a performance, the reason why all these characters were out of their element was because of how Skully put LSD in the chocolate fountain, and he even mentioned later on in the episode to Franklin, tell Jerome and Louie I hope they enjoy their wedding gift, which is the acid that he put in the fountain. So as Jerome and Louie had their wedding, we saw everybody having these chocolate strawberries, but Franklin taking a whole plate for himself. Now, just a bit of a background, this acid normally does intensify thoughts, emotions, and perceptions, but having a high dosage of LSD can really cause these visual hallucinations, and this is why we saw Franklin really go through this inner war with Rob, Veronique, and especially himself. But just before we get to Franklin, where everybody seemed to be completely out of their element and in their own thoughts, from Einstein to RV, Leon, and Gustavo doing his roly-poly, Wanda was the only person who was sober, and it was a complete contrast to last season to show she really has transformed, but she was also sober because she's allergic to chocolate. Now, she also had a brief conversation with Leon, making sure that he was okay. But the conversation that Leon had with RV while they were high about visiting different countries, he told Wanda he wanted to go to Africa, but he wanted her to come with him, which completely threw her off. But let's talk all things Franklin Saint and his hallucination scenes, and it started with him acting weird with Sissy, to seeing an imaginary squirrel running past the table, and then we saw him having this conversation with Leon, telling him that even though they've been through their shit, he'll always be his best friend, and hopefully they can make it right with their people, especially with Louie and Jerome. But of course, as we went through, it is way too late. But Snowfall really did do a good job to show us this other side of the drug game, rather than the violence, gang wars, and death that comes along with drugs like this. So for the first time, we saw Franklin on the other side of the game, where he really did have to face his inner demons and the actions of his past. And as he moved through Leon, RV, Wanda, the first person he saw was Rob, who questioned his decision to kill him, because he said he would never have given Franklin up. But Franklin's response was he couldn't trust him, but Rob told him what goes around comes around, and you can only do so much fucking before you end up getting fucked. And this is what I think will happen to Franklin in the end. Manboy's prophecy will come true, Rob's words will come true, and so will Veronique's. But before we get to Veronique, Sissy went to look for Franklin because she realized they'd been dosed by LSD from the chocolate fountain, and when she found Franklin, she had this turn where she unleashed on Franklin, telling him that she has a son who put people above their father and money before God, and whatever he does it for himself. But one bad moment led to another, and this was followed by a hallucination scene with Veronique, who reminded him he can't be a gangster and a family man, and he will have to kill those closest to him because he'll drive everybody to betray him. For example, how we're seeing Louie already betray Franklin. But where he was having these hallucination scenes, something that was a part hallucination scene but was real, was this conversation that he had with Teddy, where Franklin tells him he's gonna kill him before he does. And this is what it will really come down to, it's either Franklin or Teddy. But where all these hallucination scenes had their own meanings in Franklin's life, the one that had the biggest impact was himself. And this goes back to the beginning, with how I mentioned the conversation with him and RV, with how Franklin's always in a war with himself. And reality really did hit Franklin, but as Louie said, it is way too late, because she's already made her move with Buckley and Kane, and also now with Teddy. But before we finish on Franklin, this was one hell of a performance from Damson Idris, especially when he pulled out the fake gun and putting it back when he realized it was Veronique at the door. And with one season of Snowfall left, I'm sure there are going to be big things lined up for his future. But elsewhere in this episode, we saw Louie and Jerome high, telling each other how much they were madly in love with each other. We also saw RV open up to Leon about the ballot and bullet, and him explaining how perception on life changes if you travel. But we also saw Ruben at the wedding, and when Sissy saw him and Franklin, she realized she made a big mistake, and she was putting everybody around her in danger. But again, just like Louie's move, this is a move that Sissy has made where she's burned her matchstick. Now, we also saw Teddy in Franklin's apartment, taking pictures of all his documents, and this deep chess game between Teddy and Franklin is something that I think will continue to rumble on into season 6. But that was episode 8, which definitely sets up Kane's situation going into episode 9 and 10, and no doubt into season 6. So drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section on Franklin's hallucination scenes and his inner demon, and especially how Louie has made a move with Teddy. So drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section, and of course if you're new to the channel and you haven't done so already, then remember to smash the subscribe button if you want to see everything Snowfall and Power Universe related. But as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.